if you've been following my VTuber drama coverage arc so far, you might have noticed that I have a bit of a bone to pick with the VTuber blacklist for failing to include certain people. Akuma Miko, Sir Cutie Yuki, Thunder Raven, and Celestial VT, whose antics I've all covered in my previous 2 videos. Well, after thinking it over, I have decided to take it upon myself to re-examine the majority of the entries. And just to make it easier on myself, let me get some out of the way that I will not be re-examining. I won't be re-examining what Torakaru was accused of, since Saphira de Noma already did an entire video trilogy on him, which pretty much covers everything. Unless it turns out that there's something he did that no one covered, like, oh say, he's responsible for a series of arsons, there is nothing for me to talk about. Plus, the whole case is pretty open and shut. If Lily herself approached me and asked me to make a video on what he did, then I would reconsider. But something tells me that she won't. I also won't cover Falter XV, since I'm a bit hesitant to make a video on someone who is very trigger happy with copyright strikes. Also, Royalty is here and Alara do pretty good coverage of his misdeeds. I am aware that he lost that court case, which got him banned from the copyright system, but that only banned him from using the copyright system for a year, not permanently. Plus, he was still somehow able to copyright strike Alara's video reacting to the outcome of said court case. That being said, this is one where if enough people want me to, I could be talked into changing my mind in the future. Shanzo, I just feel Alara and Static Tokyo did a good enough job covering, so I would have nothing of value to add. Obviously, much like Torakaru, if something else that no one talked about comes out, I'd be willing to change my mind, but for now, I'm not going to cover Shanzo. Melia the Maid, honestly, this one I'm not going to cover only because their entry just strikes me as one that's really boring to make a video about. I'd run out of ways to say, yep, he's a bigot, and I would just be repeating myself. As far as I know, no one has tackled this one, so if anyone who makes scripted content is looking for a video idea, here's a freebie for you. And lastly, we have Radiance. You might also know him as Karo the Wolf. I have only one response to stuff involving him.
Mac wants the flamethrower. Mac wants the what? That's what he said, now move!
If you really want to know what he did, and this is one case where I actually would not blame you if you chose not to look into what he did, Lanza and Cecil McFly both made videos on him. I do not feel comfortable talking about what Karo did, and if you know what he did, you understand why. But other than those 5, I'll be re-examining them all. And possibly more if the blacklist does return from its hiatus and puts more people on there. But that can wait, and it's also something I'm going to take a while to do because there are a total of 13 entries for me to review, although I might end up deciding, you know what, some of these don't need to be reviewed after all. I will elaborate more on this next month when I actually start the project. For now, let's talk about another person the blacklist overlooked, Demon Lord Lucien. And by the time this video is over, you'll agree that the blacklist should have included him. What would they have added him for? Well, you'll have to wait and see. One thing that is really small that I have to complain about with him was the choice in font he chooses to use. I do not know what the name of said font is, but he used a font that made the letter H look like an X. And as such, when I first found out about him, I legitimately thought he used zim pronouns. It's worth noting that Lucien is trans. That otherwise doesn't play a factor in what I'm going to talk about. It wasn't until I looked at his Twitch page that I saw the word hentai in his bio feature the oddly shaped letter H. That made me realize that this wasn't the case. Now, I do use a font for some of my titles and my logo that I could see some people finding kind of hard to read. Sinzel, if you want to know the name. But for pretty much everything else, I stick with a font that is easy to read, Arimo, which is actually the same font as the UI from the Stalker games. And even with Sinzel, I do think it's easier to read than whatever font Lucien used. But anyways, as usual, do not harass anyone I bring up, which is some advice that Lucien in particular should take to heart, but I'll get to that later. Anyways, let's start with something that's small about him, but is a pretty big red flag. For whatever reason, Lucien really claims to relate to Oh Sang-woo from the manhwa Killing Stalking. And from what I can tell, he's unironic about this. If you want a more in-depth explanation of what Killing Stalking is, since I was not going to read it just for the sake of this video, I would suggest you go watch this video by the channel Melon Tea. Now, I mostly read manga like Vagabond and Ubel Blatt, both sign and action manga with some amazing art, which I'm showing on screen right now. I do read other stuff, but these are my 2 favorites, and if it seems like I'm stalling a bit, I'm going to be discussing some pretty dark stuff, so I might as well just give myself a quick breather. So, something like Killing Stalking wouldn't have appealed to me from the plot premise alone, and if I didn't know anything, I'd just assume that Sang-woo was a manhwa equivalent of Patrick Bateman, and given that he does have pretty big following. If that was the case, I could maybe let it slide, but it's not. Sang-woo is not just a murderer, but also a rapist, an abuser, and a stalker. In fact, the author of Killing Stalking has explicitly stated that there's really only one character who you can view positively in the entire series, and while I can't say who that character is, mainly because I don't know, and quite frankly, I have no desire to read Killing Stalking to find out, I do know that it's not Sang-woo. In fact, Lucien likes Oh Sang-woo so much that he has, or had, an ASMR channel named after him. Oh Sang-woo ASMR, although he's changed the name since. So I guess it would be more accurate to say that he had a channel named Oh Sang-woo ASMR? It's almost as if he wants to hide it. And mind you, this isn't like some doxing thing. Lucien has admitted to running the channel publicly since he posted a face reveal on it that he linked on his Twitter account. This is honestly not the video I would have expected that I would wind up talking about ASMR on this channel for the first time, but you know what? It could be worse. At least it's not really relevant to the story otherwise. I will come to this channel later on when I talk about certain subjects, but for now, let's move on. Fun fact, because of his ASMR channel, I actually found out that Lucien unintentionally doxed himself. I got curious how much of a following Oh Sang-woo has, so I decided to see if there were any fan groups or some social media sites. So I looked on like other sites. I stopped after checking Facebook because I found a group by the name of the Church of Oh Sang-woo, and as it just so happens, Lucien made a post with his IRL account that explicitly name drops the Oh Sang-woo ASMR YouTube account name. And before you ask, this information was publicly posted, so it's not doxing. Now, it would be one thing if Lucien only liked Sang-woo's design, or he did so without knowing anything about the character. Maybe if he only knew about Sang-woo from a fangirl's description, and if upon being told what Sang-woo was actually like, took back his statement, that would actually be one thing. I say this as someone who chose his last name for his VTuber avatar without actually looking into what that person, Mitchell Warbell III, had actually done. I could also understand if Lucien loved to hate Sang-woo, since there's an entire trope for that kind of character. But saying that you relate to someone like Sang-woo, that's a huge red flag. Does Lucien also consider Sho Tucker to be a good father? And mind you, Lucien has been told what Sang-woo is like, according to Jinx, yet he could only really give a stuttering defense. But this is just where we're getting started, so if you thought I was being really petty, know that it only gets worse from here. Let's talk about how he's a hypocrite, shall we? So, if you pay attention to him for long enough, one thing you may notice about Demon Lord Lucien is that he kind of has an obsession with calling out someone named Lumi Starbun. Who is that, you may ask? Lumi Starbun is someone who basically has been accused of being a pedophile, and from what I can understand, the evidence against her is pretty credible. If I was to go into detail, I would be here for quite a while and the video would go off the rails, so instead, I'll recommend these videos by Toastify and Harley TBS if you want more info. I'd like to make it very clear that I am not defending Lumi Starbun, who I'm going to refer to as LSB for the rest of this video. And if I accidentally call her LSD, so be it. LSB absolutely deserved to be called out for what she did. I had originally written a segment about how I didn't know why Lucien was so obsessed with LSB. Then I spoke with an ex of his named Sake and another ex. I'll get to them in a second since the situation with them is complicated. And it turns out that basically LSB said some really nasty stuff to Lucien. Now, I've gotten conflicting reports on what she said to him. Sake said that LSB told him to end his life, while another ex of his said that LSB called him a pedophile. It's entirely possible both are correct, and it's also possible more happened between Lucien and LSB, although I will say that his actions do actually make a lot more sense if they're viewed as defensive mechanisms. It's also worth noting that it's entirely possible Lucien isn't telling everything that happened between him and LSB, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I would also like to let it be known that if LSB finds this video and tries to use it as a way to attack Lucien, that she can go to hell. I do not want you using this video as a way to escape consequences for what you did. Now, this does explain why he posts about LSB so much, but there is still one thing I'm not sure about. Namely, it's how he finds LSB's new accounts. It's not like he constantly shares stuff from other people, or even includes evidence whenever he does find a new account. The most recent account he claims belongs to LSB is Bun PNG, who is rebranded as Bun the Artist. And I'm gonna refer to them as just Bun for the rest of the video. Now, I would normally just make a note of this in the intro as an oddity if that was all there was. But here's the thing, Lucien doesn't apply his standard of You shouldn't be friends with people who associate with bad people, to himself. I say this because if he did, Lucien would pretty much have to cut ties with everyone who's friends with him. I say this because you may remember how, over a year ago, the VTuber Dragonspit was in a VTuber Smasher Pass, where she received some pretty hateful comments about her model. If you don't remember, or this is your first time hearing about this, I'll play a clip of it right now.
What dragon women are supposed to look like in the VTuber community. Just pass. Pass. Mm-mm. I want scales. I want muscles. I want flat chests because dragons don't have tits. And I want a big ass on them and a long ass tail with wings. And I want them to breathe fire and drag me into their cave. I don't want some prissy palace bitch looking at me going, you must kiss the royal thingies if you want to even touch the royal wings. No, bitch, get the fuck out of here. You're not a dragon. You're just cosplaying as one. Fuck off.
Attention.
Well, the person who made those comments about Dragonspit's model was a VTuber named Cowbell Chaos, who also goes by Cowbee, which is what I'm gonna refer to her as. Cowbee hasn't gotten over the fact that a bunch of people called her out over those comments, and according to someone who I found out about her changing account names from, she has been stalking and vague posting about their friends. I did try and reach out to the person who made the post so I could see if I could find anything from them, but I never got a response. I do like to at least try and verify stuff. You won't see me making a video where I only use unverified rumors as the basis for my claims. Why is this relevant? Because Lucien is a friend of Cowbee's. While Cowbee has deleted her account on Twitter, Lucien did interact with a bunch of posts from Cowbee, which I'm showing here, and as you can see, some of these are from after those comments Cowbee made about Dragonspit's model. And as I mentioned, the VTuber community has not forgiven Cowbee, and Cowbee has not apologized over what she said for this. Now, once again, I am not attempting to downplay what LSB did. Objectively speaking, what LSB did is worse than what Cowbee said. But I just find it pretty hypocritical that you're choosing to associate with someone who's pretty toxic while calling out others for associating with someone who is also problematic. It's not like Cowbee and you are both in the same agency or group and you have no choice but to associate with her. There's one more example of hypocrisy regarding follower policing that I'd like to bring up. Remember how I mentioned Lucien's ASMR channel? Well, I'm gonna play audio from one particular video. Before you ask, the entire video is just a static image, so I don't need to show the visual.
Pardon me. Pardon me. Where were you at when I needed somebody? No, you were too busy trying to, trigger warning, send me photos of you putting a cord around your neck. Okay, showing me that you have bruises around your neck and you didn't know how to explain it to your, co-workers. What about that shit, What about that? Or how you told me that you had a 15-year-old boyfriend who dumped you and then you felt depressed because he didn't love you. But guess what? I was always there to listen to you when you needed it. I was there to comfort you when you needed it, but that was never enough. It was never enough. Nothing was ever enough. Because I wasn't doting on you 24/7, but I was doting on my friend Dreamy and giving her attention that you desired. She became upset with me and became irate. So then she would take it out on the vent server. And she needs to quit fucking trying to act like she's so I'm holier than thou. She has a fucking NSFW RP room where underage kids fuck each other in roleplay form. Okay? I don't care if your characters are adults. You guys are underage. So you know what? I don't have nothing like that on my server. I have nothing but
That's right. Lucien had a friend named Kayla who he knew was a pedophile and still kept in contact with. He only ditched her after said friend stopped being useful to him, not after she got exposed. So Lucien, who the hell do you think you are to judge anyone else's follows or associations? But we are far from done. Let's talk about some of the more serious stuff he's done, such as blackmail. Okay, let's start this next segment off with a bit of a disclaimer that also addresses the elephant in the room that's going to pop up in this segment. This next segment involves someone who is on the VTuber blacklist, who I actually did speak to while I was looking into the stuff about Akuma Miko. While Akuma is not on the VTuber blacklist, she is on the VT blacklist. But here's the thing, none of the stuff that the person I spoke to is accused of automatically justifies what Demon Lord Lucien did to them. There is one other thing that really complicates things about her entry on the blacklist, but if I say that in this video, I'd derail the entire video since I'd have to go into full detail. So I will give an explanation and that's more in-depth as to why I have an issue and why things are really complicated with their entry in the next video, because it's more appropriate there. Let's just say that from now on, I would instead recommend you use the VT Awareness and VT Blacklist Twitter accounts as reference for the immediate future. The person in question is Riedel64, who also goes by Shu Ivy and Aura Sumeragi. I will examine Shu's entry in the future as part of this project, and I do have quite a bit to say about it. So until then, let's just pretend that the allegations against Shu don't exist whenever I bring her up in one of my videos, okay? Glad to get that out there. With that out of the way, to preempt any comments about using Shu as a source, let's continue, shall we? So, Shu and Lucien used to be in a relationship. After Lucien dumped Shu in May 2024, Shu got some art commissioned by an artist called Cha-kun, featuring her and a friend named Kira Arias. Said art is hentai, so I'm not showing it for obvious reasons. And before you ask, I have no idea why she chose to commission a hentai piece of her and a friend. It's not really my place to ask. It's her money, as long as Kira was okay with it. I see no problem. However, the art in question had Kira and Shu in a pose similar to one in a piece of not safe for work art that Lucien and another VTuber, Ali of the Sea, were in that Lucien had gotten made while he was in said relationship with Shu, and the art really upset Lucien. I know this is kind of awkward to talk about without actually showing the photos, but again, the photo in question is hentai, and I'm not going to start uploading my videos on a certain orange and black site just to show them. Also, I don't have the photos, so even if I could, I don't have the means. Before you ask, it was their VTuber models, not real-life photos, so this wasn't a case of revenge porn, although that will come up later. Lucien would later threaten to not only call the Japanese police on Shu. Before you ask, Shu is an American who lives in the States. I know what you're probably thinking, and I will address that in a second, but also threatened to dox Shu. Considering Shu bought Lucien his 2.0 reference sheet, this is one hell of a way to repay her. Shu did have other experiences with Lucien that I'll get to later, but for now, let's talk about how Lucien is keeping his victims silent, how he's also slandering some people. Now we get to the more telling stuff. Lucien's been accused by some former partners / friends of his other than Shu. This is mostly about his response to them, but I will give you brief summaries of them, and I will link the threads / docs that the accusers have put out if you want to read them. There is one other person who had a bad experience with Lucien that I'm not going to bring up because A, I couldn't find their statement, so at most I could say it's plausible, and B, I think it's best saved for last because of something it's related to. First, we have a statement from Selkie, a shapeshifter VTuber. In a statement she released, she describes how Lucien disrespected her boundaries by being very lewd, even though she made him aware of this. This happened even when she just wanted to have a normal conversation. Lucien would just make it as lewd as possible. Lucien later told Selkie not to like him and basically broke her heart. Now, the latter wouldn't be notable on its own, except for a few things. First, Lucien would say stuff like that all the time and act as if it was just a joke. Second, Selkie later realized that Lucien never cared for anyone else, and he's likely done this to other people. Lucien also tried to make Selkie out to be the bad guy in this situation. And she later posted about how, in general, Lucien was obsessed with the feelings of other people as well as messing with said feelings. Selkie also accused him of having a victim complex, which, while she doesn't provide any evidence, that would actually explain why he is so obsessed with Oh Sang-woo. She also phrased things as if Lucien was addicted to messing with others, as if it was a drug, and I can totally buy that. And lastly, if Selkie tried to post the full conversation to rebut Lucien because he would only post parts of the conversation where Selkie was the one who said lewd stuff, he would report her posts, even though he claims to want to stop this, his actions say otherwise. You know, considering Lucien views Oh Sang-woo as relatable, I shouldn't be surprised to find out that he takes advice from Falter XV on how to deal with controversy. This inspired another VTuber, a Fox VTuber named Sakai, to post a document containing her experience with Lucien. She'd actually been a pretty good friend to Lucien, and while he did trauma dump on her, she doesn't think he did so intentionally. They grew pretty close. She helped him with things when he was in the hospital, and she even started to develop a crush on him. Lucien did eventually return her feelings, although he confessed to a friend of theirs, Sleepy, first, and the two started dating. She was happy, although Lucien wanted to avoid making their relationship public because he didn't want people to harass him over his past relationships. Because of something Lucien went through with an ex of his, Sakai agreed. A week later, however, Lucien asked to take a break, which Sakai was fine with, but Lucien never made it clear if it was an open break or a closed one. Sakai would be affectionate with Lucien, and she admits that she was a little bit too affectionate. Lucien was flirting with other people, which Sakai was actually fine with, until she noticed that it went from friendly to intimate. Sakai admits she didn't discuss this with Lucien, but he also never checked with her to see if she was okay with him flirting like that. Eventually, during a game of Minecraft, a friend of Lucien's told Sakai that they also had feelings for Lucien, and they were supposed to have a romantic evening the night before playing, which raised a big red flag for Sakai. Sakai tried to talk to Lucien about this, but he didn't hear her out at all. Rather than let her state her case, he kept on guessing and assuming things, and rather than hearing her out, he got upset or defensive, and Sakai never got the answer she wanted. Then Sakai saw Selkie's post, and after sending Selkie a message saying she wasn't alone on an alt account, Sakai decided, with Sleepy's help, to try and just tell Lucien that she wanted to just be friends. Lucien responded by asking if Sakai was mad, and Sakai didn't immediately respond. Sleepy told Lucien, "We'll talk when we want to," and Lucien responded by immediately leaving the conversation, taking the easy way out. Lucien claimed he only wanted to be friends, which both Sakai and Sleepy denied. A few days later, Sakai noticed she wasn't in his group chat and found that he had blocked her on Twitter. Lucien's defenses to these accusations is kind of telling. Rather than saying, "Hey, I get why you might have thought that, but that's not what I meant to say," or just posting evidence completely debunking their claims, Lucien is attempting to use Japan's laws on cyberbullying to silence those who would speak out against him. He also took stuff out of context in his response. Now, you will find that he constantly cites Japanese law to be rather ironic by the time this video is over, considering that there's actually one he broke, but I'll get to that later. I was actually rather curious about this, so I asked a few people, most notably the VTuber Vex, who does have some law experience, not a ton since he's still finishing law school, but a decent amount, and sure enough, unless Sakai, Sleepy, or Selkie did a serious crime to him, Japanese police couldn't do anything. And if he did try and go to the cops, Lucien would have to forfeit his hardware to them, which would actually incriminate him, since not only would they be able to view all the messages that were still there, they could also get deleted messages. So Lucien, do you need me to explain what a catch-22 situation is? Because if you do want to go down this route, you will find out the hard way. Now for the topic of slander. Lucien loves to make accusations without any actual proof. Lucien made a post calling out someone for being into loli and Shotokan, who followed someone who is apparently a doxer, Kishimu if you can't tell. I don't know how true that is. If anyone wants to leave anything in the comments disproving or proving those claims, by all means do so. I'll heart your comment. That in and of itself is not a problem. As far as I can tell, Lucien isn't a fan of that stuff, and he isn't a hypocrite on that topic. It's possible he might have liked a ton of lolicon hentai after Elon removed likes, but I doubt that's the case. Even if that was, I wouldn't even bring this up if this was all there was. However, the reason I'm putting this here instead of the segment on follower policing is that Lucien then claimed that the person he was calling out was also a catboy VTuber named Shaba. There is a big problem with these accusations. Namely, Lucien doesn't have any definitive proof. Shaba actually responded, as you can see here, and he basically said, "Hey, that's not me. I reported and blocked them, and I did try and tell you this. This is using Google Translate, so I apologize if it's inaccurate." Now, it is worth noting that Shaba doesn't offer any proof, although all he'd have to do is show what accounts he has linked. You can have multiple Twitter accounts logged into the same app and browser, but at this point, the burden of proof now falls on Lucien, who does not offer any additional proof. Additionally, Shaba did try and reach out to Lucien over Discord to resolve things privately, but Lucien just dismissed him, and these messages were ones that Lucien himself posted. I'd like to state that, for the record, I do believe Shaba, if only because he chooses to communicate in German if he has the choice, whereas the few screenshots that were shown phone were in English. So why would he switch to a secondary language for an Oz account? This isn't going to be the last time that Lucien's own Discord DMs will be used in the video, and it's also the least damning. Now, here's the thing. As I mentioned from talking to some of Lucien's former friends, it's apparent that he just had one bad day that he never really recovered from. And for a good amount of the stuff I've brought up so far, I can actually believe that. Hell, for the stuff with LSB, I actually don't blame him for how he's acting. He clearly had a really bad experience with her, and I would not want to go through the same thing he went through with her. Shava is one of the few cases where I am inclined to say he acted maliciously, though. But let's start talking about the really disturbing stuff. Let's talk about how Demon Lord Lucien is obsessed with an ex of his, and how he is stalking her. Let's go back to talking about Shu. See, Shu and Lucien were actually in a relationship at one point. However, Lucien dumped Shu after 2 months. They got together in March 2024 and split up in May of the same year. The reason was because Lucien wanted to get back with another ex named Bunny, who, well, let's just say that I could probably make an entire video on Bunny by herself, since I was sent some very interesting stuff, which I'm showing on screen right now. However, even when he was involved with someone else, he still couldn't get over Shu. There is one other thing that Bunny's involved in that I'll get to soon. Yes, once again, I am talking about someone who is a stalker, and unfortunately, once again, it's not someone who has explored the Chernobyl exclusion zone. One of these days, I'll be able to talk about someone who meets the good definition of a stalker. The first time was Akuma Miko's boyfriend, The Last Distress. If you want to know more about that, go watch the complete case against Akuma Miko, which is a video that kickstarted my whole VTuber drama coverage arc. Miko actually kind of ties into Lucien, but I'm not going to talk about it here because I want to make a third video on Akuma later this year, since if you haven't noticed, she seems to be connected to a lot of VTubers who happen to be terrible people. I'll link to the document that Shu put out containing her experience with Lucien in the description if you want to read it, but here's the thing, Lucien wants to control Shu. Even though Shu spoke out against Lucien and she has made it clear that she wants nothing to do with him, Lucien does obsess over Shu since he shares posts from her even after she ended things with him. As you can see from this notification, I think I am starting to understand why Lucien relates to Oh Sang-woo so much now. Hopefully the part about Oh being a rapist and murderer is also not something that Lucien has in common. Since I'm talking about Shu, I might as well bring this up. Lucien was also pretty abusive in general to her. Shu is afraid of Lucien, so she hasn't spoken up against him. She did, however, give me a document, which I mentioned earlier, that she had written telling her experience. She also said this as to why she doesn't want to speak out. No one will believe my words or even say I deserved everything that's been happening to me, and I do not think I'm ready to face it, but I don't want Lucien to pretend he is an innocent individual when he has done heinous things to not just me, but others as well. Before anyone asked, while the document is written by Shu, it says that I'm the one who owns the document because I did slightly resize a few of the photos so it's easier to read them on desktop. However, Shu also gave me some recordings of Discord VCs between her and Lucien. I can't play all of them since some of the recordings have Lucien refer to Shu by a real name of hers, but I cut said name out. There was some stuff that Shu gave me that I couldn't quite include because she only gave me half of the evidence, but I did include it in the master drive evidence that I've linked below. Now, here's the thing. I mentioned that I spoke to a few of Lucien's friends, and they told me how he's been through a lot. And as I mentioned, for some of the stuff I brought up, I can actually believe that if he hadn't been through whatever happened to him, he wouldn't have done them. Up until this point, I would say that if he genuinely did attempt to change himself for the better as a person and went out of his way to make amends, he could redeem himself. I cannot say that in regards to this last one, because nothing can excuse his greatest sin that he has committed. What sin is that, you might ask? Well, I saved it for last because it is the worst. Lucien is guilty of committing revenge porn. This is one thing that Lucien has done not once, but twice. First is against someone named Dreammint. Now, I would like to note that Dreammint has accused Lucien of grooming her, but because I can't find her statement, and she deleted all the messages she had with Lucien, I do not feel comfortable coming to a conclusion. At most, I can say it's plausible. Lucien had a friend put out a thread that contains some DMs. I'm not gonna link the thread because, well, by the time I'm done talking about this, I'm sure the person who posted the thread thread will be horrified to realize what happened. There's one image from this thread that I'd like to point out. Namely, it's an image of Dreamint sending Lucien a photo of her wearing nothing but a bra. The image in question was censored in the original doc I got this from, but in the original thread, it was uncensored. If you somehow find the original thread, or you find the person who posted it, do not link or name them in the comments. I will delete any comments that link the thread or name the person who posted said thread. They're already going to feel awful by the time this video is over. No need to make them feel worse, and quite frankly, I don't blame them because they truly believed that they were doing the right thing. It doesn't matter if Lucien consented to being sent the photo. The fact is, Lucien gave the photos to someone without the consent of the original person, and I'm assuming that said person sent the photo to Lucien with the belief that they would remain private. The photos don't involve any nudity, but I would say that Dreamint had a reasonable expectation of privacy when she sent them. And Japan does have laws on revenge porn, before you ask. The appropriately titled Revenge Porn Prevention Act was passed in 2014. The second article of said act includes images, quote, which the sexual parts of the body, such as the genitals or the surrounding areas, buttocks or chest, are exposed or emphasized, and which are intended to arouse or stimulate sexual desire. The photo Lucien received from Dreamint featured her in her bra, in other words, emphasizing her chest, and as we can see from the screenshot, she sent it with a message that I would say indicates that she wanted the photo to be arousing. And none of the screenshots show Dreamint saying that she was okay with Lucien letting other people see them. Now, it would be one thing if Lucien had given those images to whoever posted them as part of the callout and they had edited them to make it look worse, but that isn't what happened. Even if you were going to argue that this doesn't count as revenge porn on the grounds that she's not naked, even though if my understanding of Japan's law is correct, it would, this isn't the only case where this happened. We also have to talk about Shu one last time. Remember how I mentioned that Lucien blackmailed Shu over a commission she ordered that featured her and her friend Kira? Well, Lucien really hates Kira and is really obsessed with Shu. In fact, considering that he also dated someone named Sakei and he was stringing along someone named Selkie, if it wasn't for the fact that he's also dated Dreamint and his current partner is named Bunny, I would swear that Lucien has some kind of obsession with girls who have names begin with the letter S. I'm now wondering if he would have tried to do anything with Sleepy. But anyways, during a session of Minecraft that Shu and Lucien had, Lucien made some comments that Shu was really disturbed by. Specifically, he acted as if he was going to jump to his death while they were at the tallest point in the castle on the server. This was all over Shu mentioning having a fictional child with the aforementioned Kira, by the way. Shu pretended to be okay and then went to hang out with Kira. Shu told Lucien she was going to head out, and Lucien called Kira a, quote, lower-ranked demon wannabe, using Shu of loving Kira instead of Lucien. I should probably mention that at this time, Lucien had broken up with Shu and was dating Bunny, and keep in mind, he was the one who broke up with Shu, yet he kept on coming back to her. After doing this, he sent Shu's nudes to Bunny and then body-shamed Shu to Bunny. But don't take my word for it. I'll just let you hear it from Lucien himself.
But why did you show my pictures? Why did you even fucking send that about me?
Okay, now we're gonna talk about this because this is actually a huge topic, Lucien. Okay, Angel, I want you to calm down. I want you to breathe in and out because this is really big subject. Because here's the thing, Lucien, te cacahuates en la cabeza, you know, but like. Has been telling me things that actually broke me. And I thought I was the pretty one, you know? And you were saying nice things to Angel. I mean, Angel hasn't admitted reading those text messages. That really hurt me, you know? But I just want to know from you.
Yes, I did call Angel, I did call Angel pretty. Yes.
Why is it for me that she doesn't look good in lingerie or her boobs are not look good? And I told you, like, you know.
Again, I said it out of anger because that's when that shit was, pissing me off when I almost fucking died. Yeah, it was out of anger. So yes, I did say spiteful things about you. I'm not wrong about it.
You even did revenge porn of me. And don't say you didn't.
Listen. It's not out there in the internet. It is not out there. I want you to understand that it's not out there.
It doesn't matter if it's not out there. He still shared my
But
intimate
okay,
photos
still,
with you.
I even asked him. I asked Lucien, ¿por qué? Why you still have them? You don't need to have them in your camera.
And I said I did not have them. I said I went back into our chat and I took a screenshot. After you're like, okay, I deleted it. I don't keep that type of stuff.
Shu later confronted Lucien about this, and he denied it, which would suggest he knows what he did is wrong. I will admit that I don't know if the number of people that see the image impacts what Lucien would be charged with if Shu decided to go the legal route. For the record, she said she does not want to do so, since she doesn't care. I did actually suggest doing so. But what I do know is that Shu never intended for anyone else to see them. And just in case Lucien tries to claim otherwise, I actually asked Shu about that, and she explicitly said that no one else was supposed to see them. Lucien, if you are still watching this, just know that whatever may have happened to you does not justify any of the other stuff that you did to other people. For your own sake, and the sake of the VTuber community in general, just leave the VTuber sphere, get therapy, and never return if you really value your own mental health, because quite frankly, you do not belong in here. But I think it's time to wrap this up before I go full scorched earth over just what Lucien did to Shu.
9.8 秒それがお前の絶望までのタイムだ
Well, this was certainly one way to start off my year for scripted videos. I'm just getting started with calling out the VTuber blacklist. While I do have other stuff planned for this year, next month I will be examining someone they actually do have on their list to see if they at least got someone right. Before I end this video, I'm gonna say one thing that will shock a lot of you if you're aware of my track record when it comes to covering VTuber misdeeds. But to Akuma Miko, I have just one thing to say. Thank you. No, really, if I hadn't looked into you, I would have never gotten the chance to speak to Shu Ivy, and I wouldn't have gotten a good amount of evidence that I used in this video. So if Demon Lord Lucien or any of his fans are still watching this, you can thank Akuma Miko for giving me the chance to get into contact with Shu, and by extension, making this video possible. And to those of you who are still upset about me using Shu as a source, I genuinely hope that you never find yourselves in a situation like the one she was in until I started making this video. Namely, terrified of someone who can harm you and too afraid to speak out. And I did put an explanation as to why I don't trust the VTuber's entry on her in the description. But anyways, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. I'm Andreas Werbel, and I'll see you on my next assignment. Later.